just drifted in.
There are a lot of different opinions about fat bikes. A lot of people think they just look weird and clumsy and often assume they must be heavy and cumbersome to ride. A lot of people who do ride them, and even some bike brands that make them, don't do them full justice and seem to think that all fat bikes are good for is riding in the snow. Yes, snow riding is one of the main capabilities of fat bikes, and they are very capable and fun in the snow, providing year-round riding. But given the chance, a fat bike can and will do a lot more. There are a lot of people who ride them on normal trails in normal conditions just because they like how they ride. I know people who live near the coast that own fat bikes and they ride them on the beach. People who want a simple, stable, confidence-inspiring bike that will let them ride easily on any terrain, be it dirt, sand, gravel, or whatever, will love a fat bike. Young or old, beginner or advanced, a fat bike will surprise any rider with what it can do. For riders like me who love getting as far out in the wilderness as possible on two wheels, doing epic adventure rides, particularly in the desert where there's a lot of sand, a fat bike is an incredible option. There's no better type of bike for exploring around any and all different types of backcountry roads and trails without any regard for the terrain or conditions. Simply put, a fat bike lets you ride in places and conditions where a normal bike would struggle, or even not be able to go at all. The majority of riding that I do is not in purpose-built mountain bike trail centers or bike parks. Even close to home, a lot of my riding is on rough dirt roads, ATV trails, and old horse trails, because that's what we have around here. Especially the ATV trails tend to have a lot of loose rocks and gravel, often with very steep climbs. While a normal bike struggles to maintain traction and control, a fat bike is incredibly good at handling the loose rock and gravel. The huge soft tires are able to maintain traction and control both up and down, and the low gearing can climb insanely steep grades. The same goes for a lot of desert riding, where I spend a lot of time exploring. Most of the trails are ATV and dirt bike trails and always involve a huge variety of ground conditions, with at least some sand and loose ground. But a fat bike can ride it all, pretty much anywhere mechanized travel is allowed. Please stay out of the wilderness areas. For me anyway, it's a lot of fun and very satisfying to ride on these rough, loose old trails, not because I'm going fast or quote unquote shredding, but simply because I am able to ride terrain and go places that most people on bikes can't. People have asked me why I don't just ride a motorized ATV on these trails, since that's what the trails are designed for. What these people have a hard time understanding is how much I love the satisfaction, the challenge, and the physical and mental and emotional benefits that come from going on these rides and seeing incredible places under my own power. I would not trade my bikes, including my fat bike, and the experiences that I have on them for any motorized ATV or side-by-side in the world. Anyway, that's enough about fat bikes in general. Let's talk about this fat bike right here. For context, this is not my first fat bike. I've had my old Fuji fat bike for a while, and I've spent some time on a Rocky Mountain Blizzard as well. However, as those bikes were alloy frames, this is my first time on a carbon frame fat bike. This is the 2020 Fezzari Kings Peak, which I've been riding for about a month now, and I have done my best to really see what it can do. For transparency, I am a brand ambassador for Fezzari, so this is not an unbiased review, but ambassador or not, I cannot recommend Fezzari and their bikes enough. Other than the dropper post and the tubeless tire setup, this bike is completely stock, just as seen on Fezzari's website for the price of $2,199. Considering that you get a very high quality carbon frame with great geometry, a 12-speed drivetrain, hydraulic brakes, tubeless ready wheels and tires, a 23-point custom setup and sizing, Fezzari's 30-day money-back guarantee, and available upgrades such as tubeless tires, a dropper post, and a suspension fork, as well as any other custom components you want, this is an incredible value. The first thing I noticed about this bike, besides how awesome the frame layout and color looks, is how incredibly lightweight it is. I don't have a good scale to get exact weights, but I'd say it is literally close to 10 pounds lighter than my alloy Fuji fat bike. It's actually a little lighter than my Fezzari LaSalle Peak Enduro bike. The frame design looks amazing, especially since Fezzari designed the bigger tubes to match the big wheels, so the bike doesn't look misproportioned like many fat bikes do. So my first two rides on this bike were in my local hills on a mix of dirt roads and ATV trails. As I mentioned before, there is a lot of looseness and steepness to be had up there. There are climbs that four-wheelers have torn up so much that they're about impossible to climb on a bicycle because they're so steep and loose. While it obviously still takes a lot of effort and doesn't go very fast, the Kings Peak can make it up the climbs. The golf ball sized rocks and loose dirt have made me spin out on other bikes more times than I can count. But not anymore, thanks to the big low pressure tires and low gearing of the Kings Peak. Coming down is no problem either for this bike. Riding down lots of loose, rolling rocks is actually pretty amazing on a fat bike. Normal sized tires get all squirrely and knocked around by the rocks, but these big soft tires aren't even affected by them. I've found I can ride really loose descents as fast or even faster on my fat bike than on other bikes. Even trails that have been blown to powder by cows are now easily rideable, and an added bonus is not having to worry about all that dust and grit getting in suspension and linkage pivots, since there aren't any. Other than the drivetrain, a simple rigid frame bike like this couldn't care less about getting dirty. The third ride I took this bike on was a 32-mile long ride in the San Rafael Swell. It was on typical trails out there with a mixture of loose, dry sand, lots of loose rock, and slick rock. I've ridden these trails on other bikes before, including with 27.5 plus tires, and I was excited to see what the Kings Peak could do. I figured it would do good in the sand, and wasn't really sure how it would handle the techie rock. The bike honestly blew me away. The sand might as well have not even been there, and while the lack of suspension was very notable on the tech, the big soft tires kept things from getting too harsh as long as I didn't go too fast. Descending, the bike did not get all loose and squirrely in the sand like normal bikes do. Instead of sinking into the sand, it stayed on top, rolls fast, and maintains control. Technical descents definitely had to be taken a bit slower than on a suspension bike. It is good to remember that while the big low pressure tires do provide an inch or two of quote unquote suspension, it is basically an undamped air spring, meaning the tires rebound very fast and can get bouncy. While climbing, that massive back tire just kept driving as long as I kept the pedals turning. Sometimes while climbing the techie sections, if I tried to push really fast, the big tires would start to bounce around a little bit, losing some control. The bike definitely prefers to gear down and power up slowly. The traction, stability, and low gearing let it winch slowly up unbelievable terrain. I did encounter a couple spots that were so steep with sand so deep and soft that there was no chance of getting up, but those were extreme cases where I was pretty much purposely trying to find the bike's limit. The 4.8-inch tires rolled over the sand, gravel, loose rock, bare slick rock, and hard-packed dirt with amazing ease. I knew this bike would be good out there, but it was far better than I expected. Other than some rides purposely aimed at riding more technical trails, the Kings Peak is most likely going to be my preferred choice for my backcountry adventures in the future, including bikepacking. Thanksgiving week brought snow, and I was able to get in a few good rides in some primo powder. Fat biking in the snow is always a lot of fun, and the Kings Peak is right at home in the snow. The stock 12-speed drivetrain comes in very handy with its wide gear range. The bike's lightweight noticeably helps it travel easier through the snow compared to heavier bikes I've ridden. I plowed this bike through everything from a light skiff to snow-packed truck tracks to over 6 inches of fresh, untouched powder, including this 22-mile adventure with icy creek crossings and a blizzard that dropped 2 inches of fresh snow during the ride. As with any fat bike, the more cold and powdery the snow is, the better, as it's easier for the tires to push through. Really heavy, wet snow puts up a lot of resistance and is more slippery. But as long as the snow didn't get so deep and heavy that any bike would flounder helplessly, the Kings Peak was awesome. The tires are absolutely key to snow performance, and the 4.8-inch wide stock Maxxis tires did about as good as any others I've tried, which include the Schwalbe Jumbo Jims and Kenda Juggernauts. It never ceases to amaze me just how capable and fun fat bikes are in the snow, and the Kings Peak definitely outperformed the others I've ridden. Compared to the alloy-framed fat bikes I've ridden, the carbon-framed Kings Peak is significantly lighter, and while it is still a rigid frame, it is less harsh due to the nature of carbon and the compliance that's able to be engineered into it. I found that the stock SRAM Eagle SX drivetrain to be solid. It's not super smooth and crisp or lightweight like more expensive drivetrains, but it gets the job done and gives you a massive gear range without a big cost. The basic Shimano brakes may not be fancy, but like most Shimano stuff, they do their job well. One thing I think a lot of people worry about with with a fat bike is the rotational weight of the big wheels and tires. Yes, there is a significant portion of the bike's weight out there, and it is noticeable when accelerating up to speed. But what a lot of people don't think about is the fact that while these big tires do take more energy to get up to speed, once they are going, that rotating mass is harder to stop. So fat bikes actually carry momentum extremely well. This especially helps them skim over sand, gravel, and snow with surprising efficiency, while smaller, lighter tires would get bogged down and drug to a stop. I am running this bike tubeless, which saves a little weight and allows for even lower pressures, but even with a tubed setup, fat bike wheels and tires aren't as clumsy and heavy as they're often made out to be. The Maxxis tires and Sunringo rims that the Kings Peak comes with do a great job in every condition I've thrown at them so far. For people who view a fat bike as just an odd bike to have for an occasional snow ride or a last resort backup when your normal bike is broke down, spending over $2,000 on one might seem crazy and pointless. But just like other bikes, there's a big difference between what you get in a cheap fat bike and a high quality fat bike like the Kings Peak. If you're looking for a bike that'll not only ride snow, but also greatly expand what's possible for you to do on a bike, be it beach riding, leisurely cruising around and exploring, desert adventures, or just riding your normal trails in a unique and fun way, it is absolutely worth the price. And of course, as with any Fezzari bike, buying a Kings Peak gets you Fezzari's 30-day money-back guarantee if you decide not to keep it, as well as their 23-point custom setup and sizing that comes with any bike. And for the specs that the bike comes with, that price is pretty much unbeatable. So hopefully you found this video useful, and maybe you've got a bit different view of fat bikes now and what they're capable of doing. If you want a closer look at the Kings Peak, I'll throw a link in the description to Fezzari's website where you can see all the details on the bike. Let me know in the comments below if you have any questions I didn't address in the video. Please subscribe to the channel and follow me on Instagram to get more content about this fat bike, as I'm predicting it'll get ridden a lot in the future. Thanks for watching. Keep digging up new places to ride.